Good morning, afternoon, and evening to you all. Thank you for joining our EUDR Compliance webinar today. My name is Guillermo Serra. I'm the sales manager for Spanish-speaking Latin America and Spain at Agritask. I am from Barcelona, yet I'm currently speaking to you from Cuenca, Ecuador. I come from a seventh-generation winemaker. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to you all. I come from a seventh-generation winemaking family from Catalonia, producing wine since 1783, and a third-generation cocoa grower family with fields in Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela. During the past 12 years, I have been heavily involved in coffee, cocoa, vegetable fats, and wine across APAC, EMEA, and LATAM, in roles from sourcing raw material, options and futures, to retail confectionery product creation. I am joined today by Sofia Stefanelli. She is a sustainable finance expert, co-founder of Primera Purpose Advisory, an advisory firm guiding investors and corporations globally in their sustainable journey. She has been part of the World Bank Group and European investment banks, and Primera Purpose offers tailored solutions to help corporations understand and comply with EUDR, preparing for a smooth transition into a deforestation-free world. I am also joined today by Mr. Javier Castro. He's an industrial engineer graduated from Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico. He has been the CEO for Grandsur for the past 7 years. Grandsur is an Ecuadorian cocoa exporter committed to the quality of the product, the environment, the sustainability of the crops, and the contribution to added value. They work really hard in providing the best quality cocoa beans, conventional and certified, to several leading clients all over the world. So if your confectionery provider sources from Ecuador, it's very likely they're getting the amazing beans from Mr. Javier Castro. Who are we? Who is Agritask? Agritask is an Israeli-based software-as-a-service agronomic intelligence and analytics platform that enables food and beverage enterprises to gain control over their agricultural supply by building collaborations across the value chains from seed to warehouse. Our platform connects enterprises to the growers, suppliers, and the source of their value chain to monitor, support, and enforce agronomic practices at scale, ensuring yield, product quality, and sustainable parameters such as deforestation mapping, carbon accounting, and regenerative agriculture. We're present in 27 countries with over 100 crop types, and our platform is designed to suit different crops, regions, and agronomic protocols, delivering corporate know-how and standards directly from the field while giving back information to the farmers to track their performance on the field. We will start with a round of questions for our speakers and end it with a live Q&A. But Getting more into what is the EUDR regulation, for those of you who might not be so knowledgeable of this new legislation, it covers the cocoa, coffee, palm oil, soy, wood, rubber, and cattle crops entering the European Union. So this is binding for the importers into the European Union, as well as their derivatives and byproducts. So not only cocoa beans, but also cocoa butter, cocoa mass, and byproducts like palm kernel expeller in the case of palm oil and other byproducts of these commodities. The requirements of this legislation are GIS polygon traceability of the deforested areas as proof of no deforestation from the 31st of December 2020, and be compliant with deforestation laws in the country of production. All medium-scale and large-scale importers need to be compliant by the end of 2024, so we are less than 18 months away from this regulation being active. And by September 2025, the first regulation review will come to place when they're going to consider new crops and new parameters for this regulation. So this is just the beginning. Finally, what are the consequences of not complying to this law is up to 4% of the revenue generated in the European Union. Thank you so much. We will start with a question for Sofia. Thank you so much, Sofia, for being here today. What are the key challenges expected along the value chains of soybean and wood forestry products with these new normatives, Sofia?
Thank you, Guillermo, for the question, and good afternoon, good morning to all our audience today. So, Guillermo, thanks for the introduction and the question. The main challenge that we see around this regulation is that all the impacted commodities have long and complex value chains. And maybe we can show a slide just to show as an example on food-related key commodities. We have on the left the soybean value chain, and on the right fiber-based packaging. Just because we want to focus on the food-related aspect. Food and forestry and pulp and paper industry are a bit advanced with respect to other commodities, as they have been under the EUTR, European Union Timber Regulation, for a decade already, while we have 6-7 other commodities involved now. So let me just focus quickly on the soybean one. But we can see every commodities have each commodity has its own complex value chains, but we can see not less than 6 layers in the process, going from the agricultural production and seeding, passing to the processing, transport and distribution, and then manufacturing and then marketing. So the responsibility of the information collection and presentation to European authorities is not just to the mainstream operators, which are defined as the first entry point of commercialization into the EU, but also to players that have significant influence in the whole value chains, like traders that have now to provide and store granular information down to the geolocation of plots and time of production. In the whole value chain, there are different levels of sophistications. We have large players with capacity and sophistication in place to gather information and store it and assess it and make risk assessments on it. But we also have very small players, especially in the production part, although there are increasing numbers of large agriculture and forestry players with hectareages of more than 100,000 hectares, for example. There's still the chain relies a lot on still small holders and family owned activities with very small hectareages, below 50 hectares, for example, in Argentina and Brazil, key production players. So information gathering, quality data, and the making of the risk assessment, bringing up risk mitigation measures will not be an easy task, and the time to prepare is now. The regulation enters into force in a year and a half, a little bit less. But for annual crops, there's basically one crop ahead of us, so there's not much time. The encouraging side is that the regulation is going to apply gradually, so it starts in a year and a half, and more adaptation time will be given to smaller players. And also the commodities impacted and the dry products impacted will also be reviewed in a couple of years. So this helps for a smooth transition. Also, the cutoff date being set at December 2020 helps, as will help streamline the geolocation and the traceability of the commodities. And also we have to say that technology platforms and the resources available are much more sophisticated now, and will allow for a much more precise traceability.
Thank you so much, Sofia. That's very insightful to know what's happening within the soy and wood spaces. Javier, what do you see that can inhibit cocoa farmers from adopting the new EUDR normative? What are the challenges for smallholder producers? Like we know, cocoa is mainly comprised of smallholder producers. So what are your insights on this, and what have you seen on your field visits?
Hi, Guillermo, and hi, everyone. Thank you for the question. As you said, when we talk about small farmers, we can relate this to the cocoa sector, because, as you said, cocoa sector is mainly composed by small farmers, not just in Latin America, but I think it's the same in West Africa and other parts where it grows. More than 90% in Ecuador, I would say probably 95% is composed of small farmers. Over 100,000 farmers, actually close to 200,000 farmers in Ecuador that plant cocoa, from very small amounts, less than a hectare, to an average of 2-3 hectares. It's the size of the farms small farmers are working. And this regulation is not up to farmers to address it. It puts a little bit more pressure on the industry side, and obviously on the people that is involved in it, in the supply chain, as exporters or traders. We are the ones who have the pressure to comply with these regulations, because we are the ones who are constantly behind farmers that say that have one ton per hectare on geo, and they only produce that through in the whole year. It's difficult for them to have, let's say, the tools to sell their cocoa directly, so they always rely on someone else to do it. And these are the persons that have the pressure, and they don't have the pressure because of this regulation right now. In the cocoa industry and cocoa supply chain has been on this task for almost 20 years now, and it's not an easy task to solve. Getting precise data and getting precise traceability, it's a very complicated issue. It costs a lot of time. It takes a lot of work, because imagine, I'm going to put Ecuador as an example. Imagine we have in Ecuador, no, it's not imagine, we have in Ecuador 150,000 farmers, let's say. And you're a cocoa exporter that works with less than 5% of those farmers. It's still a big number. And when you have to complying with all this information, just imagine how much time it takes to visit 5,000 farmers every year, several times. It takes a lot of work. It requires a lot of technology tools to have proper data collection, to get the polygon mappings. So it's something that definitely it's putting the pressure not on the farmer, it's putting the pressure on the companies who traded the beans, and they are the ones that will need to comply with with these regulations. And now that I was involving a little bit in the process of getting collecting the data and making sure it's trusted data and it's verified, that will help us a lot, because before 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 we can do the whole due diligence and fill the compliance and everything for the EUDR normative, the most important thing is the traceability. If we don't know where the cocoa we are sourcing comes from, it's going to be very difficult to see if it has deforestation or not. And that's the first thing we have to address, traceability. And traceability can only be been achieved successfully through technology. And as I said, not an easy task to do. Cocoa supply chain has been trying to work on this for the past 20 years. It has invested a lot of resources, and we haven't get the best results yet. Hopefully with this normative that are going to get in place, not only in the European Union, but at some point in other destinations, puts a little bit pressure to do things faster and achieve goals that has been moving forward every time. So hopefully by 2025, we can start, as Sofia said in the last question, this is something that it's not going to be like, it's going to be going step by step. It's going to start in 25, but it will take a long process to get everything in place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those insights, Javier. Really valuable points there. Just wanted to add my comment there. The past weeks I've been in Costa Rica, in Peru, in Colombia, meeting leading producers, meeting global coffee companies and heads of associations, coffee growing associations. And there is a true concern that less than 50% in across these countries and across other regions in Latin America, less than 50% have the necessary information to get this EUDR normative. And one of the biggest issues is having the title of land ownership. We know that this is a constant problem in Latin America, is having exactly what is the area of the farmer, what is the area of production, what is the active area of production. And sometimes having only user-generated data is not enough. Sometimes we need geospatial data, we need satellite-based technology to be able to validate this information, but also the titles of ownership of this land. I do see, especially in coffee, perhaps more than the other commodities that we're talking about, a strong commitment from the private actors to get these farmers under this normative and other sorts of normatives. But talking about other sorts of certifications, normatives, regulations, Javier, do you think that existing certifications can aid in the adoption of the new EUDR? And in which aspects is the EUDR similar to other existing certifications like Rainforest Alliance, Fair Trade, Organic Certificate, and others?
Well, I think certifications are important because not only that all of these normative follow up, as you said, same guidelines as certifications do already. Like a lot of the guidelines, about the UE normative, it follows a lot of guidelines from different certifications. And certifications also bring something that it's very important, that it's transparency, because as traceability is important, transparency and data protection are two things that are also really important. And transparency, it's what the certifications gives. Like everybody, when it's not like doing your own program where you are your own auditor and you think that you are doing things well, it's better to have a third party being supervising that what you are doing it's well and it's transparent too, because information it's verified by the certification. You get audits every year, probably you should get more, but yeah, certifications are a key factor, a key point to go through the future.
Thank you, Javier. Sofia, what other sustainability or compliance initiatives can be tackled as part of the EUDR compliance? This is a great chance for many of these commodity producers to take a step up, not only for what is required for this regulation, but taking other parameters like human rights, like water use, like other sustainability parameters. So how do you think this initiative can help assist on other angles beyond what is required from this EUDR?
Absolutely, Guillermo. Having to comply with the EUDR is basically forcing key food industries to make a deep assessment and really understanding where their raw material comes from and when it was produced and whether it produced deforestation or forest degradation. And we see it indeed as a big opportunity for companies to come across other issues, sustainability issues along the supply chain. You mentioned some of them in aspects such as human rights, labor, safety, malpractices will all be scrutinized as a result of the audits and the screenings that the companies will need to undergo. So it would be an opportunity for them to review all these practices, biodiversity issues, efficient land use, water usage, indeed, soil degradation, being more efficient in inputs optimization, and also monitoring and trying to reduce carbon emissions. Again, technology can help tackle many of these aspects. The human rights and social aspects are a bit more tricky. They involve engagement with local communities and civil organizations. Yeah, the most important is to get prepared in advance at the start of the applicability of the law to enable a smooth transition. It's important to perform a screening of suppliers now as soon as possible, understand who would be compliant, who would not, engage with all of them. And as Javier said, indeed, the industrial segment is the one really having this responsibility, as they are the first point of contact with the less sophisticated yet numerous producers. It will also be interesting to map what is the current situation of the companies and the production against EUDR, but also against local legislations and other international standards. We noticed there's some lag in terms of definitions of what is deforestation under EUDR versus under local legislation. Just to name an example, EUDR defines as part of the physical characteristic definition of the forests, trees high 5 meters high trees, whereas, for example, the Argentine local forest legislation defines them as 3 meters tall. Or cut-off dates, EUDR cut-off date is December 2020, other large players and traders are making public commitments with other cutoff dates or other programs. For example, the Amazon soy moratorium had established as deforestation cutoff date 2006. So harmonization of all these will be challenging, but it needs to be assessed and as soon as possible to be prepared for this change.
Thank you, Sofia. I agree with that. I think what we're seeing is the proliferation of more and more certifications, parameters, organic, human rights related, environmental related. But this might be creating a lot of noise for producers, right? Because in the past, they'll have to comply to one regulation. Now they need to export to the EU, to organic products, Rainforest Alliance, and some others. So this might actually create more complication for especially for farmers having to gather all this data, many times data that is redundant because it repeats itself, is usually from the same framework. So what I'm seeing, or what I'm predicting from the perspectives that I'm talking to in the region, in Latin America, is kind of trying to concentrate all that data in a single platform and use it for the different certifications according to the need. Both user-generated data, GIS technology, industry trends, or in general country trends of production, cadmium levels, prices, etc., whichever parameters you want to include. Javier, are you aware of any initiatives that collect this kind of data on behalf of the government, NGO, or private organizations? And what could be the role of these actors in assisting data collection, let's say for producers of cocoa in Ecuador?
Yeah, in Ecuador for the past year, there has been an initiative driven by government and by non-political or associations that, yeah, basically are trying to draw a guideline for traceability for a local traceability system, that it's the most important thing they want to measure. But it has been not, I would say it has not been so successful, because getting 100% good traceability is very challenging. I'm going to give you an example. In Ecuador, less than 50% of the farmers, and we're talking about, as I say early, a big number of farmers, they are informal. Informal, I mean, what I meant by informal is that when they sell their cocoa, they sell their products without a proper invoice. They sell it just through cash or whatever, and it's at that time traceability is lost. When the farmer sells his product through an informal way, traceability is completely lost, and gives also and it's also very difficult to measure. I'm going to give you another example that I have seen in the years working on traceability programs. Normally, these farmers that they cannot sell their cocoa in formal ways, they sell either to middlemen close from where they plant their cocoa, or they sell it to a neighbor that has an invoice he can sell. But all that informality makes us to lose the traceability of where cocoa is coming from. And it's like this bothers me a lot, because these incentives by governments or NGOs or private actors, it's a lot of money involved. Like, it's a lot of money that it's invested every year to make things get better, but they are not, because we are not aligned in the same way. Because setting up these traceability systems in our countries, it's challenging, it's very difficult to supervise, it's very difficult to control the information. Everyone wants to keep their information safe, like they don't want information leaked to other actors or competitors. So that's why that's the reason I think this type of initiative, it's not going to be easy to work.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you.
Yes.
It would be nice, from the information that governments have, in this case, ministries of agriculture or those collecting information from the land, to make GIS and multispectral government data available for the public. Because sometimes it's difficult to access this data, even for private companies like us, right? We see certain governments, certain ministries being very cooperative with this data and make it easy to use for private companies to help farmers. But sometimes we see this lack of visibility. And that can cause additional problems, and it raises the bar of adoption and makes it more expensive for small holder farmers or for small private companies to offer these services. Sofia, are we seeing any developments for soy or wood forestry products in terms of adjusting to the EUDR regulation? And what public or private initiatives can aid this process?
Yes, these commodities that you mentioned have been under scrutiny from private and public organizations for a long time. And over the last 10, 15 years, several private and public initiatives have been taking place. On the private side, we see, from the one hand, large players making public statements of zero deforestation by 2025 or 2030. Which is great, as large players, meaning traders and agricultural players, agro-industrial players, play a catalytic role and serve as examples to follow within the whole industry. Although, again, there is some uncertainty and lack of consensus still on the definitions and cutoff dates. On the private side, we also have certifications and sector associations involving civil society organizations and industry. In example of soy, the Roundtable on Responsible Soy Association, or in the case of forestry, the FSC certifications, or the PAFC programs for sustainable forest management. They are excellent to position already the sector in a very good standing. They are very demanding, not only on the farming and forestry, forest management side, but they go beyond it. They are really they're already demanding in terms of labor safety aspects, community relations, legal compliance, good business practices. So this is a great starting point, as also Javier mentioned. Although they don't have to be considered as a green lane for EUDR compliance, because they are a good starting point, but they're still they still need to have due diligence systems in place, information systems in place, and geolocation of the raw material, with all the difficulties and challenges throughout the chain that we mentioned. On the public side, stricter and clearer legislation at local level in the main countries of production, and where most of the deforestation, of course, is key. We saw many developments in Brazil and Argentina, which are among the largest globally impactful players, both in pulp and paper, fiber, and soybean. For example, the Ley de Bosques in Argentina, in place since 2009, created a series of statal organisms dedicated to monitor native forests and implement measures for their protection. However, again, enforcement of regulations is not easy, given, as Javier rightly mentioned, the high level of informality still. And it not only applies in cocoa, but unfortunately a lot also in forestry and and other involved sectors. In Argentina, there's 40% informality in forestry, which difficults a lot the traceability indeed. So all these private and public sector-led initiatives have resulted in decreased rate of deforestation, but we still have large hectareage of deforestation occurring still every year. So we hope with the EU regulation and harmonization of and harmonization of definitions and availability of data, as you rightly mentioned, it would be great to have a common database available to all. This will force the sector to really stop this phenomenon.
Thank you, Sofia, and thank you for mentioning also the wood and forestry. We're actively talking to prospects from like balsa wood in Ecuador and Peru, pine and timber, Uruguay and Chile, and in other countries, mahogany, rattan, rubber, and other sorts of woods. And we're seeing that the traceability that they manage, which they call the chain of custody for woods, right, from harvest to warehouse, is a very advanced version of what we have in traceability for cocoa, for coffee, and many learnings that we're getting from these kind of actors. But moreover, what we're seeing also in the forestry, especially those producers near the Amazon region, is their will to stop being associated with illegal deforestation. I think that there's still that kind of an image in parts of Latin America, in Brazil, in Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, that those forestry products grown near the Amazon are automatically legal or are not sustainable. And I think a lot of the prospects, a lot of the industry movement that we're seeing from those producers near the Amazon regions is to disassociate themselves from that. They don't want to be part of that illegal logging, or they don't want to be part of those unsustainable practices. But going beyond that, I'm interested to know what's next. So what is changing now with the EUDR in respect of other regulations, like let's say the EUTR, right, the European Union Timber Regulation, and what comes next in terms of sustainability legislation? For this question, I'd like to start first with Sofia and continue with Javier, right? Just a general overview on what do you think is coming next, and what are the European Union or other bodies going to ask as next regulations and compliance?
Sure. Yes, clearly the European Union is working hard to meet the Paris Agreement commitment and net zero ambition. So we can only expect European Union and other countries globally to adopt similar measures and to review existing legislations that currently only involve the European space. We can foresee an increase in scope of products and of geographies. We already saw it with the EUDR, which is the evolution of the EUTR that indeed introduced stricter requirements and enforcement measures. It increased the scope of this regulation and increased the operators involved. But we can definitely expect similar measures. For example, regarding water use, the European Union is quite active on this topic, with a number of regulations already in place in the European Union for water reuse, for better water management, to avoid water, to better manage water scarcity and droughts, and the effect of climate change. So there is a political momentum also driven by the UN 2023 Water Conference to accelerate actions for better water management by 2030, and this we expect this to have an impact on high water intense crops and commodities worldwide, such as rice, sugar cane, fruits and berries, to name a few. Javier, you can complement on your side.
Well, one of the things that are going next are also part of the social aspect, because social aspect, it's what has driven problems through these supply chains through different ways. Example, after the pandemic in Latin America, in Ecuador especially, the education system has weakened a lot in the last 2-3 years. Latin America is going through a difficult economic situation at the moment. Hopefully it gets better in the coming years, but the truth is that educational system has weakened. And considering the current cocoa prices, current prices are very high at the moment, and this environment gives the incentive to adopt practices that shouldn't be allowed, like forced labor or informal labor or child labor, and this even deforestation. Ecuador, it's a country that has not been in the cocoa sector. There is not much, has not been related with deforestation too much in the last years. I really haven't seen that much deforestation issues related to cocoa sector in Ecuador. However, this is something that can change really fast, because if cocoa price is really high and the incentives of doing something wrong, like deforestation or child labor or forced labor or anything related to social aspects or environmental aspects, it's going to could start happening in this combination of no opportunities, no job opportunities in Ecuador for young people, or lack or lack of education in rural areas. All these social problems affect the supply chain and give incentive for these things to start happening. Not necessarily the EU regulation is going to solve these problems. These problems can come at any time. Maybe we start solving a little bit the deforestation issue in the next years, but we don't know what's going to happen later on if we don't control things. And that's why I mentioned that technology is going to be a key factor to have things in control, because things can go the wrong way very easy if we don't have the right control practices in our supply chain.
Thank you for the great input, Javier. Very good points there. Yes, cocoa is at the record level prices right now. I think that's going to be an interesting topic next week in the Chocoa fair here in Ecuador. I think that's something we're going to hear a lot in the coming weeks. What is estimated is that prices will not change anytime soon. What do you think about that, Javier? What do you think, not only through this regulation, but also with the El Niño effect? Do you see any effect on the price of cocoa in the coming year, 2 years? Do you think it's going to stabilize? Do you think it's going to go higher? What are your thoughts on this?
Wow, it's a very difficult question to answer, but I'm not sure what prices are going to do, but what I have been seeing in the last years is that production in West Africa is not growing anymore at the same rate it growed the last 10 years. And this is obviously putting some pressure on the demand side, because next year, for sure, I'm not only the one who say it, but a lot of people has already confirmed that we are going to have a deficit, a small deficit for the next crop. And this is something, as you say, because of El Niño or effects, or simply because no more cocoa is being planted on forests in West Africa, or they are taking regulations. They are making, I think they are doing a good job. I think West Africa producers, like, they are really trying to control the deforestation in their countries. This is something that has caused them a lot of damage, and they are trying to fix things. And this is why you don't see production there, it's growing, because they have stopped what was happening. And taking that into account, we are not going to see production going up that much in the next couple of years. We expect demand to keep a slow growth at 2 or 3% per year. So if you ask me, I'm not sure when production and demand are going to meet again. This could not happen, I don't know, in 5 years, 6 years, who knows? Because cocoa is a tree that doesn't grow in 6 months. It takes 2, 3 years to grow. So until people start planting more cocoa, it's going to take a while.
Very interesting, but also very scary. I got a hold of this little pot on my visit to a farm 2 days ago, and I'm concerned this might become a rare item in the future. Thank you for sharing that, Javier. Sofia, to wrap up this webinar, what's next? Which products will be next for the regulation, whether it's the EUDR or for other regulations? And what will be the scope of these new products, right? So we're talking here purely about traceability, not deforestation, but we're hearing a lot about water. We're seeing the situation right now in Uruguay, having no access to water. We're seeing that situation also in the Mediterranean with lack of water. What do you think will be the next crops and the next focus for European Union legislation or non-European Union legislation? Will be also nice to hear what was the internal local legislation coming from LATAM, or examples from the United States, Japan, or other regions.
Yes, water indeed will be a key aspect for regulating both at the European level union and in the key agribusiness producing countries globally. Indeed, the effects of the droughts in the southern cone and in Europe as well are having significant even financial losses for a variety of sectors, especially the ones with the high intense usage of water. So we can expect the expansion of this legislation to the scope to cover other crops and fruits and vegetables. Some I mentioned before, for example, rice, sugar cane, but also fruits and vegetables, berries, avocados, bananas. So it's tricky to foresee what the European Union will legislate on those, but for sure it's going to be stricter and stringent policies that we can expect soon at the European level, and then other major producing countries will follow. Yeah, water is one of the main on the main aspects, but we will also expect some interventions also on the chemicals and pesticides sector to protect both human health and environment. At the European level, there's already a lot in place, but definitely we can expect the scope to get larger. So yeah, the problem will be financial resources in place to tackle all these new legislation requirements. As Javier was saying, there are many small and unsophisticated players with limited resources, and it will be tricky to be on top of all that is in place and all that will come. An angle that is interesting, that is already going on in the European at the European legislator level, is monitoring climate impact with a focus on physical climate risks and transition risks. For increasing number of companies and financial actors in Europe, is already mandatory to make a deep assessment and analysis of climate-related risks. We can definitely expect this to be copied. Well, the UK and the USA are already following the European example, but we can expect this to be expanded to developing countries. The good news, let's say, is that also on that front there's a lot of technology available. Data availability and granularity with the satellite technologies is higher and higher, and allows for very precise analysis, and also specialized consultants can be a useful resource to help navigate these and assess climate risks and how to mitigate them.
Thank you, Sofia. I heard from you avocados, and I completely agree with this. I think we're seeing some regulation, especially in Chile, in the case of avocados, right? Local regulation for the use of water. And I also wanted to mention about edible nuts. We're also seeing increased regulation, especially because of the excessive use of water, especially in almonds. And it's a category that is driven by the increased consumption of plant-based products, especially plant-based beverages. So I also foresee some sort of regulation tackling almond production and other edible nuts, mainly from the angle of water use and CO2 emissions as well. But what are your thoughts on this, Javier? What do you think will be the other requirements that will come from the European Union beyond what we're discussing in this EUDR? We cannot hear you, Javier.
Okay, sorry. I think water is going to be really important, as Sofia mentioned. And also, I think everything related to biochemicals or pesticides, everything related in everything related to biochemicals in food, and I think that's like kind of the next step.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you for your input there. We're wrapping up this webinar now with some remarks. We would like to say that Agritask offers resource use and Scope 3 emission measurements and documentation. We also offer audit-ready sustainability metrics and orchestration of certification processes, including parameters that come from user-generated data or from satellite-based information or third-party integrations. On our behalf, I also wanted to say thank you to many organizations that are taking part of this webinar and that have helped us expand our message, including ADEX and AGAP from Peru, Cacao from Ecuador, Ministry of Agriculture of Ecuador, Fede Cacao in Colombia, Association of Coffee Producers in Mexico, and ICAFE in Costa Rica, among others. And also want to thank the many private companies, customers, and prospective customers who are attending today from Latin America, EMEA, APAC, and North America. We hope this webinar was useful. Feel free to please reach out to me or to my sales colleagues if you're interested in hearing more about Agritask. If you want top quality sustainability consultancy, I encourage you to reach out to Sofia. And if you're looking for top quality cocoa beans sourced from Ecuador, I encourage you to reach out to Javier. Both Javier and me will be in the Chocoa Chocolate Fair next week. From Tuesday to Thursday in the city of Guayaquil, Ecuador. You can visit Grandsur's booth that day, or you can see my speech on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. at Hotel Hilton Colón in Guayaquil. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.